You
Welcome,
don't know who
everybody.
you're
We are
accepting.
Oh
here.
yeah, you don't know.
Were
Welcome.
you starting there? Oops.
No, that's okay. It's okay because the banter is good. This is what we need. So, folks, welcome in. This is a kind of a Salt Committee special here. Fire Emblem Cipher is or was a card game for Fire Emblem stuff. Discontinued 2020, I think it was.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I'm here with two members from the Cipher Discord. We got Basil and Colonel M. They are, to my understanding, prominent members of the community. And they will be assisting me in a little project I've decided. This is inspired by the Duologs on YouTube. Go check him out. Good crew of team over there. Good team, good pals. What they did, he primarily played Yu-Gi-Oh! And Hearthstone, I believe, and he started doing card analysis videos for card games that he has never played outside of like a demo game. So he's done analysis on cards from Magic, from Digimon, from like a few other games, and he had someone kind of like a little voice of support, and as well as his live stream chat. Now we don't have that today, but that's okie dokie. But we do have two prominent members from the Cipher Cord to assist me with potentially analyzing some of these cards to see if they are good or bad. And we have a bunch of cards. We actually have 48 cards, folks, for that were submitted to me total. Basil suggested, I think, maybe 20 of them potentially, if not more. And I got a bunch of other suggestions from other people, which is really good. So what's going to be cool about this, guys, is that you two won't know what cards I have selected today. So we're going to go through the cards, and we're going to have Colonel M and Basil just kind of just helping out to see if my analysis of a card will be a good or a bad card in the, I guess, meta or overall, I suppose. But
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah, we'll call it that.
A card can only be good or bad after all.
That's right. Or a 6 out of 10, yeah. But we're gonna.
No, it's either meta defining or trash.
Either a 5 out of 7 or it's a 0 out of 7.
Oh, we're grading it out of 7. Okay, done. So, I'll make
A
sure
perfect 5 out of 7.
I'll make sure in the
Perfect 5 out
edit
of
I'll just add like a big fat 5 out of 7 on the front of the screen. All right.
Perfect score.
So, folks, I'm gonna pass it over to Basil and Colonel M for a little personal intro, if they don't mind, because they know far more about the game than I do. I don't know. Let's start with you, Basil. Why not? What can you tell the folks about yourself in the Cipher community?
Well, let's see. I've been playing for about a year now. I played, or I guess rather, playing in tournaments for over a year. I've been interested in the game for longer, but I mostly played with just a small group of friends offline. But then I started playing in tournaments about a year ago. I won a major earlier this year, and right now I'm doing pretty well on another major, so we'll see how that goes. But I also do collecting, and I mostly play green, purple, and white decks.
Which, for those who don't know what those are, green is represented by the Tellius series of Fire Emblem games, so Ike's games. White would be Hoshido from Fates, and what was the other color, sorry?
Purple.
Purple, so the Legendary Weapons faction, I guess, which is the Game Boy Advance titles.
Yep.
Cool. And Colonel M, what about yours, sir?
So I've been around on the server, well, I guess we'll say active, for a little less than a year now. I've played in a couple tournaments here and there. Mostly participated in some of the more top, like I've been in Top Cut once and nearly made it in the last tournament, but just fell a little bit short. I've also played like a lot of the history tournaments from time to time. I actually won one of the sets back in set 3. So other than that, usually the colors I play are yellow, blue, and sometimes I dabble a little bit in purple.
Okay, so you two kind of match with the purple. Yellow is the Jugdral games, so like, what is it, Holy War, I believe?
Yeah, Thracia and Genealogy.
Yeah, okay. So the Jugdral games, Holy War, I believe, the faction. And blue is Awakening.
Yep.
Yep.
There's also red, which is the Arcanea games and Valentia games. And brown is Three Houses. Black is Nor. Black and white, I know, is a shared combination of the faiths.
Yeah, it kind of represents Revelation.
Yeah,
yes,
it's
yeah,
like
fair enough.
Vala, kind of.
Oh, that word we're not supposed to say.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Got it. And what we're missing
First
one.
rule of Fight Club.
Colorless.
Oh, colorless, yeah.
Which is kind of like the Fire Emblem Heroes OCs, the Warriors OCs.
The Warriors, yep.
And a couple other characters that are colorless. I know there's a colorless Ira.
Yep. So anything I think that appeared in Warriors for the most part, or at least in Heroes, at least has like a cameo. Like, if they're popular, they have a cameo of it.
Yeah.
So a cool little thing that I do know, one of the first things I actually learned about Cipher, is that in Shadows of Valentia, there is actually a Cipher DLC, which contains characters specifically from Cipher as DLC characters in the video game. There are Cipher original characters, and I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think there's like loosely one for each color. Like they had a starting cast, and then they added a new one, Poe, for Three Houses. And I can't remember how many. I think there's like 8 or something.
All right, so folks, we have today 20 cards randomly picked from the group of 48. Whether we get through all 40 today, or pardon me, all 20 today, we'll see. But we do have 20. And these are all randomly selected, all randomly generated. Some of them, again, were submitted by Basil, and others were submitted by other folks that I just kind of compiled in. Personally, I did no looking into any of these. Out of all 48 cards, I think maybe 2 of them I knew anything about, and I think only 1 of them I actually have on my shopping list. So it's going to be good, because none of these cards I know nothing about. So this is going to be really, really interesting. We did, not really a demo game, but we did do a big kind of look over of all the rules and how the game is played. And I think I'm confident enough to have some form of analysis. I played a bunch of Hearthstone. I played early Yu-Gi-Oh! I know a bit about Pokemon. I know a little bit about Magic. And I've played a few other card games too. So I don't think I'm a bit of a noob, but it's going to be an interesting analysis with the 3 of us here, and I think it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, and we'll do our best to give you no hints whatsoever, so that way you can flounder on your own.
Right. All right, so gentlemen, I'm going to screen share now. And we're going to just get right into it with our first card, which is already on screen for you folks, but now you folks will see it. Too. So this is our first card of our randomizer here.
It's purple.
Yeah, it is a purple card. We got Canas, the Benighted Smile, I suppose is his title. So to my understanding, class isn't too much of an issue or much of a factor. But some classes, they tend to have like a shared stat line. So the bottom left is attack, bottom right is support. They have a range, and he's a male and he's a tome user. Is there anything you guys want to add to that before we go over the card overall?
Oh yeah, just that classes typically determine your stat line for what cost you are. So he's a 4-cost druid, which is like one of the caster classes. So 4-cost tome units will typically have 60 attack and 20 support, and 1 to 2 range. So like the classes kind of determine the stat line there.
And to go a little bit further into the deployment cost, there are some classes that have like the numbers inversed a little bit. So if you see a card that says like a 3/4, for example, but it has like 50 attack, that's part of the reason why, because it's being treated as if it were a 3 cost and not a 4.
So first off, we got Canas here, a character I'm not familiar with personally, but I do know he's from Binding Blade, I think.
FE7.
Oh, he's Blazing Blade. Okay, wow, I'm playing that game on our stream right now, and I don't know the character. All right.
He's mentioned I don't remember if he's mentioned a little bit in there. Yes, actually he is because of Hugh in Nime.
Yeah,
or
that's who I
90.
was thinking of, Hugh, yeah. Right, so he's a Blazing Blade character, which at the time of this recording, we're actually playing that on stream right now, blind, so that's fun so far. Right,
You're
so he's
playing
got...
the game and you didn't recognize him?
Oh, we haven't met him yet.
I was about to say they're probably not far enough.
In game, we haven't met
That's
him.
fair.
I know of him in Heroes, but like I forgot what game he was in. Whatever.
Alright, fair enough.
Yeah, I got a pass. It's okay. We haven't met him yet. All right, so he's got a first skill, Luna. Now green is activatable, correct?
No, that is continuous.
Oh, it's continuous.
So,
Okay. So during your turn, so while he's on the field, during your turn, if your opponent has 4 or fewer cards in their hand, this unit gains 20 attack, pushing him to 80 attack alone. And knowledge of unfathomable magic, red is what? Act?
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so...
And the other tag is once per turn.
Yep.
Right. All right, so once per turn, you can flip over a bond, which in this game is kind of like lands and equivalent to magic. So once per turn, choose up to 2 tome users, or magic users, whatever. 2 tome users, 2 tome cards from your retreat area, which is your graveyard in this game. Then place them on top of your deck in any order. Now, from what I understand is that if, from what I learned from Basil earlier, is that purples can kind of cheat their supports. Now, when a card is attacking, the top card from the deck comes in and uses their support number to assist with the attack. So in this case, let's say it would be 60 attack and then a 10 support card shows up. The card would then have 70 attack, correct?
Right.
Right. So in this case, you can choose 2 tome users from the retreat area and place them on top of the deck in any order. So then once you could declare an attack, you would know which cards would have some form of potentially powerful support skill or a support value. And coupled with Luna, I think having, so let's say 20 plus that would be, let's say 80, 4 or fewer cards is, I think, pretty generous. There's not particularly a hand limit to my understanding.
There's not one.
Nope.
Okay.
There is no hand limit.
You start with 6. I do know that. And there's no hand limit, but 4 or fewer I think is lenient. I think it's generous enough. And being able to pick and choose 2 tome users from the graveyard to put them on top of the deck to assist with a super potentially powerful attack. I'm going to go on a whim. I think this is a good card. I think out of 7, I would rate this a 6.
You can rate out of 10, though. We were joking.
Out of
Yeah.
10? Okay.
Yeah, the 5 out of 7 meme is just basically that it's a perfect score. It's just a dumb joke.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can
I
rate it out
got
of
you.
10.
8 out of 8 would rate it great. Okay, understood. All right, you know what? I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 card. I think it's a pretty solid card. I think it's a really, I don't know if it's a staple, but I think it's a really good fit on potentially magic-heavy purple decks. But I'm going to go on a whim. I think this is a good card.
All right. You want to take the one, Colonel, or me? Or me?
I could let you delve. I could let you delve on this one for a little bit.
We can
Okay,
chat,
cool. This card is insane. This is like
Is
a
it?
color. This card is like very, very good. It's like a key staple card in one of the strongest decks in the game.
Really? Wow.
So the reason is tome cards in purple typically have very strong support skills. Like straight up just letting you draw cards.
Yeah.
So what you can do is stack two. You get to stack 2 tome cards. You stack a card that you want to draw, and then a card that lets you draw a card, and then you do your support and you draw the card, and then you have like tutored a card from your retreat area into your hand for 1 bond flip. And you can just combine it with other stackers to like make sure you get more, either just random cards that you draw or just a bunch of good cards that you specifically want to target. And then notably, he can also stack cards that make your opponent discard. So so you can get your opponent down to 4 cards to make sure he gets his Luna buff as well.
Wow. So it is basically a staple then. Would you say you'd fit this on nearly every purple deck, or would this be like just like a top tier card in a top tier deck?
It is very strong. It could go in pretty much any purple deck, but purple like is pretty varied in the amount of decks it runs. So it could be a version of other decks, but maybe not the preferred one.
Hmm.
But in like one of the top tier meta decks, this is like card number one that you want to draw.
Wow.
Yeah. So to elaborate a little bit further on that too, um, on top of that, basically you just also get to rig your supports. But the most important thing is with skill one. So going back to what Basil said about having stacking what would be to force your opponent to discard. That skill technically works during the combat phase. So in this case, what you would do is you would stack a Rye 1, and if you swung with Canas and your opponent had 5 cards in hand, they would have to discard due to the effect of Darkness Emblem, which then would allow Canas to have plus 20 attack during the attack. So that skill actually can come into play during the attack.
Hmm. Wow. So yeah, this is a pretty solid card then. I mean, even at like a baby reading this card, like a baby Cipher player reading this card, like it's got nothing but good positives. For a once per turn one bond to get not only rigging but also just like huge attack and lots of combo potential. Yeah, I think this is definitely a pretty solid card.
Yeah, your reading was good. You just didn't know how broken the tome cards are.
I guess, yeah, I suppose.
A, a lot of this just goes back to like general game knowledge too.
Yeah,
Well, not necessarily general, but just like having more advanced game knowledge. Uh, but from what you could tell generally, you knew like this card was really strong as is. Just there's a lot of insane combos that you can do with this card. Well, I shouldn't say insane, but basically like the combos you could do with this is pretty disgusting.
Yeah, you can just cheat out a lot of cards or make your opponent discard a lot of cards.
mm-hmm.
It's just very flexible because you don't have to. You can also, like I said, you can combine with other stackers as well to like get even more effects off, or get the right perfect ordering that you want.
Going back to the draw effect, the thing that's nice is if you know you can guarantee the draw, you could technically draw for a critical for one of your other tome users too.
That as well. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yep, or you could get an evade for Canas to keep him on the board, which is pretty common
Mhm.
as well.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So this is a pretty nutty card. All right. I'm glad my first one was correct. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Our next card in line here. Moving onwards. Where's the next button on this damn thing? All right. Alvin, the Quiet Hero.
Hmm.
This was I don't know who suggested what at this point, but yeah, this is our next card. We got Halvin here. A bit of a clown in Thracia, but that's okay. There's a 2-cost, 40 attack male axe user with a support of 10. He's got 1 skill, so green is continuous. During your turn, this unit gains 20 attack, so that would make him a 60 on your turn at all times. And his second skill is capture. Blue is what again? Auto?
Auto. Yep.
Yep.
Alright, so automatically, when this unit's attack destroys an enemy, you may pay the cost, which is, in this case, flipping a bond. When an attack destroys an enemy, you may pay the cost of 1 bond to draw 1 card. I think for... It seems like it's kind of like... In a way, it seems like it's a bit of a deck fill... Or, not a deck filler, but like a booster pack filler. Kind of. Like, Halvin to me, especially during our Thracia run, he definitely was a filler unit. But honestly, I think like for just 2 mana per se, 2 deployment or 2 bond or whatever the correct terminology is, I think it's like a decent card. He doesn't seem all. There's no downsides. He's got like a solid enough, but like flipping 1 bond to get 1 extra draw and just a free 60 attack on your turn. I feel like maybe 40 is a bit too low on if it's the opponent's turn for like a 2 cost, maybe 40 is a tad low. But I know yellow has some wacky bonds and whatnot, and like potentially high support stuff. I'm gonna say he's an like a decent card, like maybe like a 7, like a 6.5 out of 10. What do you guys think?
So I'm trying to at least be open about this card. I guess as a non-starter, um, this card definitely is not running many decks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
say I've not seen this card before.
in fact, I was pleasantly surprised this was a card. I do like the callback to Thracia as far as like the capture mechanic.
Yep.
That is pretty
Mm.
cool. So I guess to kind of delve into it, a lot of the axe users usually have like plus 20 on offense, and then on defense they're usually a little bit weaker.
Mm-hmm.
This card at least being a 40 makes it a little less annoying, but there are two really big issues with it. So the first is like being a 10 support isn't really an ideal thing that you really want in the
Yeah.
games. Usually with being a 10 support, you want to make sure that you, as a card, that you're very impactful. And Halvin just doesn't quite have the impact. The destruction to draw a card is like a flip one for drawing a card is okay in value, but I would question like what this deck would fit in. Yellow decks do um they don't necessarily have to do tall, they can do more aggro style. But the thing is like some decks, they're a little bit constrained on flipping bonds as is. There are better things to spend your bonds on than just flipping one to draw a card if you destroy something.
Right. So like kind of that 1-for-1 doesn't seem all that important, I guess.
I mean, the thing. Okay, 1-for-1 is considered pretty good, but the problem is the condition. Um, 60 attack is okay. It'll probably hit stuff, but your opponent just evades, and then you don't get the card, and they get to keep their thing. So
Yeah.
they're kind of like 2-for-1ing. They're denying you the draw, and also they keep their unit alive. And also it's awkward because it's like he's on turn 2 he's okay, but then after turn 2 he's very very bad.
Mm-hmm. And he doesn't promote it into anything either.
No. The thing too is like you could deploy him in later turns. Like going back to what I was saying, some aggro decks do have that little bit of room to where this could be an okay deploy. It's just there are cards that are a 1 cost that already are a 60 that can be a 60 base. And is a card that also is a 1 cost, which paired with another unit gets to be plus 10 all the time.
Right.
Yeah, they're basically 1 costs that not only are similar in stats and abilities, they won't have the on hit, but the main thing is they also have a better support. So even if they're a 10 support, they'll have attack emblem, which means on
Mm-hmm.
offense they'll do 30 support instead of just 10, which is what you really want for an aggro deck. You want good offensive supports, that way you can make sure your attacks connect.
Hmm.
And this guy is only a 10 support on attack and defense. So
This,
that's
yeah.
pretty rough.
To say this was pack filler, I'd say that's pretty on point.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's just pretty mid.
Even in
Mhm.
Thracia, he was a chapter 1 axe user that was outclassed by another chapter 1 axe user that you can get. So
That's the
Yeah,
power.
that sounds about right.
Yep.
yeah, power corrupt by his friend in chapter 1 of Thracia. There you go. All right, well, I think I'm 2 for 2 so far. That's not too bad.
Yeah, I think your rating was a bit high, but you were correct about the pack filler.
Yeah.
I
I
think
would.
like
I think I would
maybe
probably rate this more like a
I'd
4
say
or a
4.
3.
Yeah,
4. Yeah, all right. Okay, all right. Well, pack filler was definitely a good guess, though. I mean, he was pack filler in Thracia, so it's fine.
Hey, he can use the Brave Axe, can he?
Yeah, he does get a brave axe. Well, he can, yeah, but I mean, Dagdar. So he's
Yeah, that's
actually
true.
outclassed by 2 axe users you get in chapter 1, not 1, 2.
Dagdar is a crazy train.
Yeah, he died in my run, but that's fine. He died in my run because he caught too many ballistas by one man named Kempf.
Mm.
Yeah, something about America. Yeah, anyway. All right, well, next card. We have this big bitch right here, Zephiel.
Oh yeah, Zephyr.
Right. So he is a 5 cost with a 4, so it can be a 4 deployment. And I know other Zephyls exist, so I'm pretty sure younger or other Zephyls can promote into him, so that's fine. So he's got the name of his sword that I don't know how to pronounce. Exax, I think.
Ekisax or something like that.
Yeah, I believe it's Ekasex.
He's an 80 attack, 10 support male sword user from the purple faction. Red is again what? Act, right?
Yep.
Yeah, alright. So activation cost, or activation, flip 1 bond for the activation. Choose 1 ally. Until the end of the turn, this unit and the chosen ally gain 10 attack. I'm gonna go out on a whim and say that's actually kind of weak. But let's keep moving. LIS, what is that? Legendary weapon or something?
Yeah, so that's a purple mechanic. Typically, you have to. It's like a special skill that's you can activate once you've used the like weapon skill a certain number of times. So the Akisak skill, you have to use it a certain number of times, and then you can use this LIS skill.
I
Yep.
see.
I believe it stands for legendary item skill.
Okay. So it's an activation once per turn. Choose 1 card from your opponent's hand without looking and send it to the retreat area, which again is the graveyard in this game. Choose 1 enemy with the same unit name as that card and destroy them. The skill may only be used if Ekisax has been used 2 or more times this turn. Oh, so you can use the first one as long as you have bond cards to flip, then you can keep buffing attack. Oh, interesting. See, now this is what this video production's all about. Just wacky cards like this. Oh boy. I feel like it's not a once per turn on his legendary weapon itself, so you can keep buffing up attack. And 80 is already pretty high. And you can get him out for 4 because he can promote into this. But I feel like 1 bond for 10 attack and then sending a card to the retreat area without knowing what it is and hoping that there's another one of those on the field. I'm gonna go. I think this card is a bad card. I'm gonna say this is a 3 out of 10.
Can we tell him, Basil?
You can tell them.
All right. I'll tell you what. Let's break it down in a couple ways. First off, let's talk about skill 1.
Yeah.
So the thing is it says choose 1 ally. Now, the funny thing about this that many people don't always realize unless they run this as like MC, for example. For those that don't know, MC means main character. Um, you can also choose Zephyl himself. So you technically can buff yourself up to plus 40 before using Heartmut on yourself. Now, as far as the attack buff, because it's spread between 2 units, and Zephyl is one of those units, it allows them to crash into units that are pretty buffed up during your turn.
Yeah.
So that can actually be pretty useful in that regard. But let's talk about the second skill, because the second skill is really the big thing to talk about here. So remember back when we talked about the last unit? I think it was Halvin, right?
Alvin, yep.
Yep. We were talking about like how 10 supports really have to be impactful in order for them to be run into the deck. So with skill 2 in mind, we have 2 things that are going on here. So let's go. So talking about discard for a second here. Most of the time when you're using the discard as a skill from like attacking, like when we were talking about Kana stacking that particular skill,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is it only works if you have 5 or more, if your opponent has 5 or more cards. So this particular card can work regardless of the opponent's hand size, barring with like one particular card that exists in the game. Um, that said, it gets a discard, but that discard could also include your main character. And because it can include your main character, and your main character usually runs quite a few copies, this means that you actually become very vulnerable to this in more ways than one. Because not only do you take damage from it, so you take an orb, or if you have no orbs, you just flat out die. You also technically lose an evade on top of it. So the effect compounds very heavily.
Hmm.
Yeah, so what happens is you have Zephiel and say one other unit on the board. You flip two bonds and you give Zephiel himself and that other ally plus 20. So Zephiel will hit most things with that, and the ally, if they're
Oh,
not like a very low cost, also gets another hit
I
with that.
misread that. I thought it was only the other ally. I didn't notice it was him as well. Okay, okay,
Yes,
okay.
it is this unit and the chosen ally. Then you discard a card from your opponent. So for this is all included in the cost of flipping two of your bonds. So you discard a card from your opponent. If that card is their main character, which is the card they run the most of in their deck,
Yeah.
and they want to have evades for in their hand, then not only have you discarded an evade from them, but they instantly take damage from it. So it is basically you hit them twice because you
Hmm.
hit the damage and then they lose the evade, and then Zephiel and the other ally are also likely going to hit because of the attack buff. So it is basically a flip two hit four times.
That's right, because there's no taunt. That's right. There's no Hearthstone taunt in this. You can just go crash into face and then yeah, and with such a high attack stat. Okay. All right. I
Yeah.
see.
So he is like one of the best finishers in the game.
Yeah, you
The
know
thing,
what? I was
yeah.
gonna say, like, yeah, he's probably like a good closer if you can make it work. Yeah, all right, fair enough.
The thing is, even if you there's a misconception people also forget too. Even if you discard a card, and it's not the main character, and let's just say like the thing you hit isn't necessarily on the field. The thing is, you probably also discarded one of their plays for the next turn,
Yeah,
so you still make a pretty big impact with this card most of the time. So yeah, this card is really good.
I
Yeah,
think
especially.
maybe I'm
Sorry,
getting
go
in the
ahead.
misconception of like this game isn't Yu-Gi-Oh, where like the graveyard acts as a second hand. Like this
No,
game's
not really.
much
No.
slower than that.
All the
Okay.
time. Some colors can take advantage of the retreat, but not many.
Yeah, like very you'll have some ways to get cards back from it, or deploy stuff from it, but it's not very common, and it's usually tempered by like heavier cost.
Okay, you
That
know
said,
what?
you're pretty accurate on this potentially being a closer. Sometimes it could also like be useful in a game where maybe you just need to like apply extra pressure. The thing
Yeah.
is, usually this card is best paired with another low cost, especially if your main character can already hit the opposing main character or something else on the field.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I guess as a closer, it's pretty solid because like flipping bonds is kind of a steep cost, or can be, especially like late game. If you started flipping whim, like if this is played early, it probably wouldn't do too much. But if you're ready to close the game out, I suppose you could just start burning through bonds as much as you need. Okay.
Okay,
I
are you
mean,
okay if I talk about that one for a quick second?
Yeah, do your thing. Yeah.
So there is technically a very high roll option if this thing is your main character, to where you potentially could rip out your opponent's main promotion. That is the scary part.
Oh, I didn't even think about that because if they didn't promote yet, you could just get rid of it.
yep,
hmm Now, bear in mind, like I said, this is very high roll, so you have to keep in mind like this does not happen all the time.
yeah. Not
But
only do you need to have this as your main character, but you also probably need to ramp or go first or both.
yep,
But
Oh.
it does happen, and if it does happen, that usually just wins you the game.
hmm
Oh, that sounds like a strategy I would use. That's my kind of play style.
maybe Zephiel MC is your main thing.
Oh, wow. But why specifically main character though? I guess because you'd already have a Zephiel out, so you could start laddering into it sooner.
So going
Uh,
back to what you said, it was like a 4 cost.
Yeah.
So the thing is like when you're playing the Zephiel MC, the advantage is that you can CC into this particular card earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, when you're playing normally with the deck, you're not usually running the Zephiel one. There are some decks that do run it. It's just usually most of them do not. So having to assume that a Zephyr 1 sticks on the field to turn 4 and then to CC, which is class change, by the
Yeah.
way, the Zephyr is kind of asking for a lot. So that's why, as main character, it's technically easier to do in that
Hmm.
regard. It's already there, it's already set. All you have to do is have this card and be at 4 bonds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing about this card is MC. This is all you spend your bonds on. Like, your goal is to just rip out your opponent's main character as many times as you can and just beat them down. Um, so, and use the attack buff and like one costs and buff them up and just try to close out the game like with using that skill. So like you don't have any other things to spend bonds on, typically. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I remember we spoke about this. Yeah, because if you're playing like a Bond MC, generally you wouldn't really run bonds in the deck too often. Whereas vice versa, if you don't have a Bond MC, you would probably run a lot of Bond characters.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I see how this card can be pretty nutty. Maybe not like nutty, but like really strong.
No, he's pretty nutty.
Is he pretty nutty? Okay,
Nutty.
all right.
He's
This-
like the same deck I told you about with Canas. This card goes in the same deck, and it's also like that. This is card number 2 that you want.
Wow. Okay.
It actually pairs really well with Canas because Canas reduces their hand size, and then you have fewer cards. They have fewer cards that are misses.
Yeah, you basically help make it to where instead of, let's say they had one main character in their hand. So instead of it being like a 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 or a 1 in 7, you basically try to minimize it to where it's like a 1 in 4.
Hmm. And then even then, you could get it down to 4 with this, and then Canas would be alive.
Yep.
Oh, we're talking deck building now, boys.
Oh, also, if it wasn't, I should say this about discarding. Typically, like most discards, like Colonel said, are if you have 5 or more cards in your hand. But the opponent gets to choose what cards they discard.
Mhm.
There isn't a card in the game, to my knowledge, where you get to choose what card your opponent discards. It's either your opponent chooses their discard or it's random.
Right.
Yep.
So there is no like you choose what card they discard. It is either your opponent's choice or random.
Okay.
So this is like the best kind of discard that you can get.
And I didn't even think about that. Like, if you destroyed an MC and whatever, that almost sort of counts as a free orb hit. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I see the strength of this card. All right. I changed my 4 to an 8. There we go.
This is a I think this is a 10 out of 10.
Really? Holy.
This card is very meta defining.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to play an entirely different way when you play against purple because of this card.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just because of the threat of like big Zephyr boss
Yeah,
monster.
you want to throw away your evades early in the game because if you have them later in the game when your opponent can play Zephyr, he could kill you.
Wow.
Yep.
And you typically also want to save. You're usually okay with taking some orbs throughout the game because those are cards for you. Even if you're closer to dying, there's still more options in your hand. But if you go down to 0 orbs, you could get ripped by Zephyr and instantly lose the game. So you typically want to have a spare orb or 2 when you're playing against purple because otherwise you run the risk of just losing for
Yeah.
just random, no good reason.
There's the threat of Zephyr could show up, yeah. I guess
Yep.
you'd know right away. If you see Zephyr main character, you're like, okay, well, you know what you're going against.
Yeah,
Yep.
then you kind of just pick a god and pray.
Right, okay. you pray to Naga and you hope. Alright. Alright, so that's my first wrong one, but or game closer I think I was correct on. Alright, cool.
Sure.
We'll agree with that one. That was fun. Alright, next up, folks. Potentially a popular one, let's see. Sigurd, a soul who lived for love. Yes, we got some text
spooky.
here. We got some text here. Now, I did, when I was looking through cards that I wanted to collect, a few of my favorite characters, actually my all-time favorite characters, some of them are from Thracia. So I was definitely looking through the yellow cards while paying attention. And the lore of the JoJo games is really cool too. So this is so Night Lord is his base class, so no big deal. He's a 0/0 with 0 attack, 20 support, no range, and he's a male sword unit. He's got first skill. Purple is which again? I think that purple skill?
Special.
Special, okay.
Yep.
So it's a special thing that's basically always live for him. As gallant a figure as in life, this card cannot be stacked on top of other Sigurds to class change him. So I guess he has to be played himself as opposed to on top of other Sigurds to promote. He cannot promote into Ghost Sigurd. Is my
that's basically what it means.
Yeah, you basically can't die and come back to life.
Yeah, okay. So
or you can't be alive and then die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
And you can't be dead unless you're gonna die. Got it.
Pretty much.
Yes. Can't be a robot either. So Ghost Sigurd is his own thing. He's got to be Ghost Sigurd. You must know the sorrows of the people. Red is an action again, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so his action. Tap. So he taps himself, I guess.
Yep.
Alright, choose one other ally. Until the end of your opponent's next turn, that ally gains +10 attack. Uh-huh. And a fleeting reunion. Blue is what again? Continuous, right.
Or no, auto, my bad.
Auto. At the end of your turn, which is again auto, so it just happens. At the end of your turn, send this unit to the retreat area. If you have an allied Seliph, draw 1 card. Now, what I understand is that some Sigurd/Seliph decks are kind of nutty from my very limited knowledge, from what I've browsed from the Cipher Discord. I'm supposing that if you're going to run this, chances are you're going to have probably Seliph MC. Is that a fair guess?
Sure.
Or Sigurd MC, either or, potentially, I don't know. Well, maybe, no, you wouldn't. You would have probably Seliph MC, I guess, yeah. Or Deirdre, even. This is weird. This is definitely one of those weird cards. And I'm glad this was submitted. I feel like an ally gaining 10 attack, tapping this unit, it's not too much, but it is until the opponent, at the end of the opponent's next turn, so it's kind of like a 2-turn buff, if I'm not mistaken, like a turn and a half buff.
Yeah, so how it works is if it says until the end of your opponent's next turn, that basically means you also have the buff on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the buff during your turn, and then your opponent's turn, and then it goes away at the end of your opponent's turn. So it's basically +10 on offense and defense.
And then once it circles back to you, it's refreshed.
Yeah, it goes away.
Right. So okay. So yeah. Okay. So +10 player phase, enemy phase. That's okay, I suppose. And he doesn't fight himself because Ghost Man. But he does go to the retreat area at the end of the turn. But does get to draw a card if you have a Seliph. Now, this is a draw 1 card for free, basically, because he doesn't have a cost. Do you still have to have a yellow bond active?
Yeah, so to play any card of a certain color, you have to have that color as a face-up bond.
Right, even though it doesn't
even though
it
he doesn't
to
cost
be
any
there.
bonds. Yeah.
Okay. So it's basically a free draw card if you're running Seliph, which chances are you're going to if you're running this card. You get a free +10 attack just to tap him for free, because why wouldn't you? And you know what? I'm going to say this is a strong card because it's free stats and a free card, and some Seliph card probably gains benefits from having Sigurd out on the field or something. So I'm going to say this is a strong 9 out of 10 card.
Interesting.
I think, because card draw is like never a bad thing, especially if it's free with no conditions.
Interesting maneuver.
Yeah.
Don't.
No, you're fine. I will say, okay. So for skill 3, It is technically a free draw, but you have to play the card to get the draw. So it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
yeah,
you're,
one for one, one for one. Yeah.
yeah, you're a cycling. It's not a free card. But the tap plus 10 is pretty good. If this was just a card on its own and it was just like, if it was like, just a random card, zero cost zero, tap, choose give an ally plus 10 and cycle, it would be okay, sure. But this card is like a 9 out of 10 card, but because it is named Sigurd, not because of any of the text on the card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much. So the thing is with this particular Sigurd is that you usually run it in decks because you class change. The thing is, because this is a zero cost, it means that you're not technically spending any of your mana or your bonds in order to deploy this card. This makes Sigurd 5/4, which is the main card that you're running from set 22, a 4 cost card instead of it being a 5 cost. So this also bypasses some nasty effects like Plumeria. So after that, just to explain what that particular card does real quick, if you want me to, I don't know if you have that card in your list.
No, I was not suggested any of the fairies.
Okay. So the thing with that card is not only do you get to draw a card because you class change, you also get to choose a card from retreat and then basically add it to your bonds. So you get a free ramp out of it. So going back to Seliph, you usually play Seliph with it because Seliph from set, I think it's 8, allows you to, once the bond is placed by a skill, you can unflip a bond. So it's pretty useful for that. And then the Seliph can also be used to give any ally, including Sigurd himself, plus 30 attack.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, he's talking about a couple different cards. The Sigurd card can flip that Seliph bond that you just got, and give any ally plus 30 attack on both turns.
Mhm. So
So
it's
it
kind.
is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna. It's the 5/4 Sigurd is the card that is like what you're looking for here. You can basically use this zero cost to. He has a very strong class change skill, so you can get that not only a turn earlier, but it also ramps, and gives you. And if you have that specific Select card in your retreat, it also unflips a bond of yours, and then that Sigurd card also has a skill that flips Seliph or Sigurd bonds to give allies buffs. And they're very good buffs.
So remember how you were looking at that plus 10 and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Now imagine that plus 10 becoming plus 30 instead.
And that's from the Seliph combo?
And that's
It,
basically from set 22 Sigurd.
Oh, okay.
yeah, that is the Sigurd can do that with any Seliph or Sigurd bond.
Hmm. And it lasts until the end of your opponent's next turn.
So a dual phase 30 just for 2 cards.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, it's like you have this card for 2 cards. You can, if you play this card and class change it, you draw a card, you get a free bond from your retreat area. And if that card from your retreat area is a specific card, you can unflip another bond, and then you can, and then if it's also that card or another Sigurd, you can flip them and give buffs to your allies.
Yep.
And then also, if you have other ways to unflip your bonds, you can repeatedly do it. That skill loses once per turn once you hit a certain number of bonds. So you could buff, your any number of allies or stack your buffs or whatever.
Hmm.
So this card can promote?
Correct.
Yeah, you
Oh.
can't promote into this card, but you
Yes.
can promote from this card.
So the
Ah.
skill 1 actually is technically relevant in a particular deck, which we won't delve too much into.
So
but
he
basically you
ladders
can't
into the
stack it on top.
5/4 Sigurd.
Right.
I understand.
So
Okay.
you could say like this card is actually a combo piece of 1 of 3.
Yeah.
Now, when you were talking about Seliph, you can actually run it in Seliph as your main character because you give Seliph plus 10 if you tap it, or one of your allies. And because there's a Seliph on the field, you get basically a 1-for-1.
Yeah,
Right.
it is also used in Self MC, just for that. But its main use is in a huge variety of decks just as one of the, like a combo piece with that Sigurd 5/4.
Basically, as long as you're running either that Sigurd 5/4 or and not even either, but like and or that Sigurd 5/4, most Selifs, and probably some Deirdre decks if I had to guess because lore. This is a pretty strong ladder / combo tool. Is that all correct?
But you say that it actually doesn't run. Deirdre doesn't usually run this one. It runs a
Oh,
different one, but it does run a Sigurd.
Yeah, it
There's a
runs the
particular reason for that, though.
yeah, it's a weird timing thing, but it
Yeah, that's
runs the
basically it.
Sigurd 5/4, but not necessarily this one.
Mhm.
hmm.
She TLDR, she doesn't really need it to cost 4.
She doesn't need her husband confirmed. All right.
Sure.
All right, well, I think I was mostly correct on that. Maybe
I
You
would
were
say
more.
you're
correct.
correct.
You were
Very
correct,
correct.
but your score was good. You just didn't understand
The
that another card
reasoning wasn't
existed.
as correct. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and to be fair,
Well,
we
the
also had
reasoning
a
was fine.
yeah, reasoning
Um,
was more than fine.
Okay.
It's more or less like if you don't know some of the other combo pieces that go with this, like this card looks pretty strong, but it's not as strong until you know those. And
Yeah,
once you
and
know those,
that's
it's like, oh, it does that.
yeah, you need to know
yeah,
both the Sigurd card and also what yellow normally does.
Mhm.
right. Okay. All right, cool. I dig it. I dig. And I think this is a really funky card. This looks like something that I would probably run. It seems
Yeah,
like a
just don't
really.
look at his hand.
What's wrong with his hand?
Well, look at his thumb.
It's
What?
kind of big.
What about it?
He's got a really big thumb.
It's okay. It's zoomed in. He's just vibe checking you with his palm. It's okay. All right. Well, our next card. This is now. This is one of the ones that when I was with my partner one time, we were looking through some cards, and she loved genealogy, loved Thracia, and so when we were looking through the yellow cards for her potential collection, her wish list, she found this card, and we looked at it, and I went, "What the hell is this?" Patty, the Just Master Thief.
Hmm.
Mm,
Now I looked at this card. This is one of the ones I looked at of all the cards back, and okay. There's a lot of text on this card, so let's get into it. So she's a 3/2, 50 attack, 10 support, female sword user. Her ability is called Work. So it's an active. Flip a bond and tap the card. Resolve the following effects in descending order until one of them fails. So effect number 1, reveal the topmost card from your opponent's deck. If that card has a deployment cost of 3 or higher, draw 1 card. Choose one of your opponent's face down orbs and reveal it. If the revealed card has a deployment cost of 3 or higher, destroy it. And effect number 3, choose one of your opponent's hand, one of your cards from your opponent's hand without looking, and send it to the retreat area. If it has the same unit name as your opponent's main character, destroy your opponent's main character. And her second skill is a once per turn activation, flip a bond until the end of your opponent's next turn. This unit gains 20 attack. So she can make herself a 70 once per turn for the cost of a bond, which is, I think, pretty powerful, potentially game closing. The 10 support is a little bit rough, but I'm sure that's not her intent. Now, obviously, she's very gimmicky, I'm sure. But I don't know if the gimmick is something like this is really, really deceptive, and I'm glad this was sent to me. Because I remember when I looked at it and I thought this card was just wacky, but really gimmicky, and I don't know how consistent it could be. I feel like a lot of cards they might be 3 or higher, like averaging is probably like 3, so I'd say that's kind of consistent. And then flipping or choosing an orb and destroying it if it's 3 or higher is pretty powerful on its own. Like even if you don't even get to tier 3 of that skill, I think tier 2 is pretty good. Even if you get to that, that's just a free main character hit. If it's a deployment cost of 3 or higher, of course. And destroying the main character. Now, I don't know if that just outright means you just insta kill the main character. I guess it does, right? Like,
It's like
Fire,
you've hit them. Yeah.
yeah,
oh, it is
you
just a
basically
hit.
would like
Okay.
them take an orb, or they would, in this case, yeah, they would just take an orb.
Okay, so it's so you
Yeah.
can so at the cost let's look at all of it all at once. So at the cost of flipping over one of your bonds and tapping this unit, you can draw one card, destroy an orb, destroy another orb because the main character, unless that's the last hit, and discard a card from the opponent's hand at the cost of one bond and self tapping. And then I guess you can't do both actions in one, I guess, because you'd have to tap. Oh no, it's flipping a bond. Pardon me. So you could flip two bonds, and then yeah, okay. So it's an interesting one. I feel like it's maybe like I wouldn't say it's too slow because it all happens all at once. It's in order. It's not like stipulation, stipulation, stipulation. It just happens until it doesn't. So I'd say this is a decent game closer, but maybe too gimmicky. But the cost of like 3 or higher deployment being the average, I'd say. And like you can take away a dodge, which we learned from the Zephiel card, which is pretty powerful as well. And like, okay, I'm gonna say this is a good card. Maybe like a 7, 8 out of 10 at most.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that.
What?
Obviously, you use this card in order to flip a bond and give yourself +20 attack, though. Jokes
Mhm.
aside, um,
Okay. But
um,
it is funny we got this after as I feel.
Yeah.
yeah, actually, very funny.
Now I know.
So,
So
oh,
you go, Colonel.
I'd probably,
You play yellow.
yeah. I mean, you do too. You technically played this card, sir.
Basil, it sounds
I
like you're
did play.
disagreeing with Colonel's like
No,
confirmation of my thoughts.
he was joking. He was
I
joking.
was 100% joking, by the way,
But
for
I
those that
did.
don't know.
Okay, all transparency. I did play and use this card in a tournament that I am currently in. So,
Okay.
uh, okay. So Patty is really funny. She's
Yeah.
ignore skill 2. You never use that card. You run
Right.
her exclusively for skill 1,
Yeah, I
and
believe it.
yeah, like it's fine, like skill 2, but yeah,
And
that's
50
not what you want.
attack is like okay. It's not terrible.
Well, you're not swinging with her. You're
That
tapping
as
to use
well.
skill
Yeah,
1.
you're tapping just to use the effect. Yeah.
Yeah, you basically when you play this card, she's going in the back line, and you're using her skill 1.
Hmm.
So it's it's basically a tech card. And a very like it's even as a tech card, it's still really gimmicky. Um, a lot of the best decks in the game, or a lot of stall decks, will run really high cost cards. Like so, you'll be very likely to hit all the effects, or at least the first two. And if
Right.
you hit the first two, that's considered good value. As you like, did get that right. If you could get skill 2, then the card has like succeeded.
Hmm.
You're pretty happy with that. If you get to skill 3, then you're just like you just hit the nuts. You're very happy with that. But um, you still discard a card at skill 3, or tier 3, I should say. Um, so like you always get the discard. Um, so all you have to do is hit the 3 or higher on top deck and in the orbs, and you get most of this card's effect, and you're very happy with that. But if you don't if you get the first one, it's very bad. If you miss the first one, it's very bad.
Yeah.
If you miss the second one, it's like at least you drew a card, but you typically you lost out on it has an opportunity cost because you have to deploy it somehow. So you could have played another card that did something better. Um, so typically, it's really niche. Like I threw it in my deck as like because I knew I was in a very serious tournament and people are going to be playing top of the meta stuff. This card could definitely see some use because the top tier decks or control decks, this card has a better odds of getting its effects off on them.
Right.
But for most other circumstances, it's way too gimmicky.
Yeah, so I guess to like expand a little bit further on that, and maybe point out some dumb facts on top of it.
I love dumb facts.
Oh, you're gonna love this dumb fact. But after we discuss a little bit more about it, the thing is, like some aggro decks aren't bothered a ton by this because usually they have like a lot of lower costs. But kind of like Basil said, the thing is that a lot of decks usually have high costs. A lot of your promotions, for example, are 4/3s. So technically, if they reveal that card on the top, they get to draw a card. The other thing is that you technically gain information with at least two of the three abilities. And actually, you kind of get it with the third ability too, because if you reach that far. So the thing is like when you reveal the card, you know what your opponent's next support is. When you choose one of their face down orbs and reveal it, considering that particular orb is now information known to you, you may know what your opponent may grab, as well as what they'll have available in hand. And then as far as the discard, well, you're basically taking away a resource from them. The nasty things that can kind of happen, if I recall, is this actually can kill somebody at one orb because of how the effects resolve.
Mm-hmm. Because it would
Yeah.
destroy it, and then it would hit the character in effect 3.
Hmm.
Yep.
But the fun fact is this skill is not once per turn.
Very true. Very
There
true.
actually are a couple cards that technically could untap this card if you really wanted to be, that person.
Oh, Basil, would Sarah do this? Because I know he loosely touched on Sarah.
No, Sarah is at a different
Okay.
time of the game.
Okay.
So this would work with like Tethys 3, for example. Or if you really want to be that person for some reason, Marth 5/4 technically untabs for flip 3. So if you really want to spend 5 bonds, be my guest.
Yeah, the the main I think one of the biggest issues with this card, one is the inconsistency, but also it doesn't really fit into a lot of decks very well
Yeah, I was thinking
because
that.
yeah, because aggressive decks, you typically this isn't a very good deck for an aggressive or finisher for an aggressive deck because they like are too fast. They'll break all your opponent's orbs before you would want to like get this card out. And this card isn't particularly good at hitting, and it doesn't have a very good support, so it just like it just doesn't work out in aggressive decks very well. And then on slower decks, you don't really need this card. Slower decks typically just starve your opponent out of resources by not hitting them, and then they don't get their orbs, so they just eventually run out of cards. And then you just generate a lot of value until you can basically win the game in like 1 or 2 turns, and you don't need this card to do that. So it's kind of in a weird spot where like it doesn't work as a finisher for aggro, and control doesn't need it either. So it's really niche just because of the timing and like its inconsistency.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a really weird card, and again, I'm really glad this one was submitted by whomever submitted it.
It is a funny card. I will
It
give you
is
that.
it is very funny when it goes off. Everyone loves
Mhm.
this card.
Nice. I don't know if there's
Except
even any
unless you play
people.
control, then you hate this card.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
that too, but it's kind of fitting with Patty and genealogy, so I dig it.
She robs people. Yeah, I guess that is the niche for her. She is very good into control. If you're like a yellow control deck, you can run this and it'll do pretty good in the mirror.
Hmm. All right. Okay. Fair enough. It's a
Just,
wacky card.
just pray they don't hit the Sigurd 1 or the Sigurd 0, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. All right. Well, that was a fun one. Let's move on to the next one here.